You're tuning into the Active Mom Podcast with physical therapist, Dr. Carrie Pagliano, a real mom's guide to all things postpartum return to workouts after baby. If you're a postpartum mom, coach, trainer, or physical therapist looking for answers on how to get back to running, CrossFit, yoga, Pilates, HIIT, you name it, without the fear of pelvic floor issues or doing something wrong, this is the podcast for you. Let's start the show. All right. I am so excited about this interview. First of all, because we've been planning it for probably over 6 months. But second of all, it brings together, I think, two people that have been just incredibly open about sharing the process of running in pregnancy as an athlete and postpartum, and even years before, about what it looks like to be a mom who's active in postpartum. So I am super happy to have on the show Steph Bruce, who I'm going to let her introduce herself because I can't begin to tell all her accolades. She's a pro runner with Hoka. And then also Sara Tanza, who's been on the podcast before, Pelvic Potential on Instagram. And I'll let you guys introduce yourself, but thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you, Carrie. Yeah, this is a real treat for me. One, to actually get to talk to you in person. I feel like through the interwebs, I've heard and seen you. And then also, this is kind of just a recorded episode with talking to one of my best friends, Sara. So, yeah, my name is Stephanie Bruce. I'm a professional runner for HokaOneOne NAZ Elite. I have been running professionally for way too long now, over 10, 12 years. I have 3 children, Riley and Hudson, who are 8 and 9. And then recently, my daughter, Sophia, who will be 6 months next week. And, oh, you guys are spinning. Did I go out?
You went out a little bit just as you were about to say your daughter's name. So try that part over again, because that's the important part.
Sure. Yeah, so just recently gave birth to my daughter, Sophia, who will be 6 months next week, which is very exciting. And it has just been a joy. I don't call myself like a new mom because I already have 2 children, but like a new phase of my life. And yeah, I think if I could sum myself up in a nutshell, I am just a very real, a very silly, nerdy mom with really big goals and really big dreams. And I sort of want my children to see that it's okay to pursue many things at once. I'm trying to pursue motherhood to the best of my ability. I'm trying to pursue professional running, making Olympic teams, kind of stamping my own mark on the sport, but also trying to be a wife, trying to be a friend, trying to be, all the things that internally we want to be. And life is really hard and it's messy and it's fun. And there's so much like on the in-between. And I think a lot of people, I guess, feel like their stories resonate with mine just because I'm one of the people, I guess, that's willing to share sort of the in-between and not just the start line and the finish line, because there's a lot that happens, in between. So that is me.
Thank you. Sara?
Yes. Hi, I'm Sara. Thanks for having me back, Carrie. I had so much fun on our conversation last time together, and we both could talk all day long.
Exactly.
I am a physical therapist. I practice in Santa Cruz, California, and I specialize in pelvic floor physical therapy, but just like Carrie, I put that name out there in the world because I'm just naming pelvic floor as part of a whole human system in the body and telling people that they have the right to have that part of their body be valued as well. But I just consider myself a physical therapist in general. I look at the whole body and I help people achieve their big goals and dreams, just like Steph said. I've been a physical therapist now coming up on, same like with Steph, I think like 12-ish years. Which is something kind of really unique about us and our journey even together, is that we're just both 2 people that are trying to be, get the most out of ourselves in our given field, right? And I named that, a long time ago, is that I want every single person who walks into my office to leave feeling hopeful and leave feeling like their dreams matter, and the things about their body that are bothering them, first of all, that those things are valid, right? And and they have a path forward, and they have a path forward to a better future, right? And that's why I named my business Pelvic Potential, because like Maggie Knott said, every human being has untapped, unlimited potential to improve. And that's what I want to get out of myself and the patients I work with. And that sometimes, like as moms, can be messy, right? Like some days our best is just getting up and like, you know, Carrie and I both love the idea of the 20-minute run, right? Like we just ran for 20 minutes. We just, you know, we could get out and we could do core work for 10 minutes, right?
Yep.
And that can be your best, just like running a marathon is your best. And Steph and I just, you know, socially, we're talking about how we just get just as psyched on friends that, you know, have a marathon goal of running 4.5 hours as, you know, Steph does of, you know, making an Olympic team. And all of those things matter. And we like to celebrate people's big goals.
Love it. All right. So I want to know, how did the dream team start? How did you two connect?
6714 Passato.
When we were about 18 years old, we met at UC.
Are you serious?
Yes. We were college roommates. Like not in the dorm, but basically there were like two groups of friends at Santa Barbara that was like, hey, I have these other friends that I know that are looking to like rent a house, but housing was so expensive and we're all like college kids. And they're like, would you want to move in with them? And we're like, okay. And they're like, yeah, there'll be 10 girls, 10 women living in this house, 5 bedrooms. So 2 ladies to a bedroom. And we were like, oh my gosh, how are we going to live, you know, with 10? And yep. And then it was just through that connection, like Sara knew basically one of my teammates. You knew Michelle essentially, right? Did you know Michelle before? Right?
I don't even know how it all came together, but we basically we all came together in this house that was super eclectic. People were in sororities, people were on the track team. Steph I was on the triathlon team. And so we started our friendship then. And it was interesting because at that time, you know, I'm in school, I'm studying all biopsychology and kinesiology, working in PT offices. Steph's, you know, already having a lot of success in college. And then we both go on to start, you know, our professional careers respectively, and starting grad school, Steph starting her pro running career. And throughout that time, we both started to just grow in our respective fields. And just kind of always had the dream that we'd work together, but I don't think we really took that too seriously.
Yeah. And then there was like a gap, right? Yeah. Like a few years where we didn't really like know that we were that close. Like I went out and didn't talk too much to people from like my roommates from UCSB, but it's like we always knew. And then I don't know how we just like something like reconnected us. Yeah. And then like when I think back now, I'm like, how have we not talked like every day for the last 20 years? Because now that we did reconnect over the last couple of years, I mean, we are just like, Sara is my go-to on life, everything, running, body, emotional, like
she's the best, right?
I mean, I try to like every time like I get to see her in Flagstaff, I'm like, gosh, like, do I uproot my whole life and move to Santa Cruz just so I can be closer? But I want the life I have in Flag. But it's like everyone that I introduce her to is like, oh my gosh, like everyone wants a piece of Sara once they meet her. And I just am fortunate that like I get to call her a friend. And
I went to the wrong college. Like, I'm just going to put that one out there. Like, I clearly went to the wrong college. So.
It's pretty funny. Yeah.
So and I say the same thing about Steph too. I think that everyone, you know, you see Steph on the internet, you see all of her Instagram things. And what I always tell people is that like, that's Steph. She is that person. Like she is like the truest friend. She is just the most real person, and her life is messy and she shares it. And so I feel the same way. And I feel so fortunate because I've had a front row seat to her growing as a person, just like she has to me. And I've just gotten to learn from her amazing practices as a professional athlete. And I think that we can learn a lot from people who are doing different things but have similar goals.
Well, I think it means something too when somebody's known you back when you were kind of nobody. I remember I was at a world conference for PT in Cape Town, and one of my PT professors was there, and she had known me since I was 18. And, you know, we're kind of immature when we're young, right? I was like, you've known me when I was just like a pain in the ass, you know? And both of us, she was there in like her capacity, I was there in mine. We're like, okay, all right, we've kind of made it. So that's so cool. You guys have that. So at what point did things start to shift and you were like, okay, we need each other in this like professional sort of sense?
I feel like 2019
Mhm.
is like when I can, or actually, no, let's go back to like She Is Beautiful
Mhm.
right after I had Riley,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what
And
And
happened there?
that was 2014. So Sarah
Mhm.
can start about like when she started the race.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think like during that time, we did so much stuff just kind of like over the phone, not like as much stuff in person because we both were living in such different places at the time. But
Mhm.
I think that, with Steph, coming back postpartum, yeah, after Riley and having Hudson so soon afterwards and
Yeah.
still having these big goals, like being able to be there on the, finish line at Stanford when she got to get her OTQ and get to,
Yeah.
go to trials at like 6 months postpartum, right after Riley. And then I think that again, between after the boys and looking ahead in her career and always kind of saying like, I think I kind of want to get pregnant again, Sarah. Like, I think we're gonna like I want to try for number three, um, and that's kind of like starting to be on that journey. And I think like there were so many things in the years before Steph got pregnant with Sophia. I would say that she was already doing to set herself up for this
Yeah.
last pregnancy, and so people can look at this last pregnancy for Steph and her postpartum recovery as like being this big success. And I think it was. And there were a lot of really amazing things that go into how amazing it has been so far.
Yeah.
But I think one of them was that like she really, she'd done some pelvic floor PT after the boys, but like I think she really went into this almost prehab mentality of her
Yes.
body before, right? And so even fast forwarding to before she got pregnant, her really checking in with that, just that area of her body with me, as well as all the amazing practitioners she works with as well.
Right.
Really, I really want to highlight like how much of a team approach Steph takes in her rehab. So, for example, even postpartum, bringing in Celeste, who's again a past guest of yours,
Yep.
her amazing local chiro team in Flagstaff, her amazing chiro in Phoenix, and a massage therapist, and all of us kind of working together. But I think that her really thinking about postpartum, I don't even know, Steph, like a year or two before you even got pregnant, right? And kind of setting yourself up.
Yeah, I think that like 20 I would feel like after I had Riley and Hudson, when they were probably like 3 and 4 was when I was like, okay, like I think I have my body sort of under control and
Yeah.
like all the training and the workouts were starting to like come together. And I was like, okay, like now this is like the second half of my career, it kind of
Right.
felt like. And that was from like basically 18 to 2021. And that was like a really rocking time period for me. I won 3 national titles, and like I was doing it as I was aging, which like kind of defies the odds in the sport.
Right.
And yeah, and I just felt like I was getting stronger. I was lifting heavy in the weight room. And knock on wood, I just was staying healthy. I didn't have any major injury for 7 to 8 years. Um, and essentially, like Sarah said, I'm like always on the defense. Like it's really easy to be like, oh, I got to see my chiropractor when something happens, or I got to
Right.
PT when, but they so much would prefer if we're in there before preventing.
Yeah. Well, that's
Yeah.
why I feel like your story, like you're kind of an OG in so many ways. Like I remember you kind of coming up on my radar screen in our circles, um, not realizing that you knew about pelvic PT, but like when, the whole conversation about diastasis came up. And of course, diastasis is, it's still, everybody gets freaked out about it and that sort of thing. And there's, people articles and all sorts of crazy things that you had to go through. But, to kind of be there at the beginning of that conversation, but then even that, hey, I can be stronger and faster as I age after kids. Like we're seeing a lot of that now. And you really kind of were in that zone already. You're like, no, I know I can already do this. And I mean, I joke around that my kids are 10 and 13. I'm like, yeah, you know what? I bet I could do it better if I went back again. I'm not going to, but you did. But you did. So, I mean, you know, obviously that was a very conscious thing, but also too, I mean, can you reflect back a little bit on how little we kind of knew in your first pregnancy and kind of how to navigate pregnancy and running versus you're actively preparing years before saying, "Hey, I think I want to do this again." It's just a completely different mindset. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, it is. That's like a really great kind of outside perspective. I think, well, first of all, when you're saying there's things you could have done better, like Sarah and I always remind everyone, remember, I'm a professional athlete and I get paid to do rehab. I get paid to do prehab. I get paid to nap. I get paid to pay attention to my nutrition. Like all the things that make me successful, I have this
Mhm.
engine behind me, which is
Yeah,
HokaOneOne NAZ Elite. And that I'm not saying it's any easier, but it's a luxury that I
it
have,
helps.
it does. Like, I make the time because this is what I'm supposed to be doing, right?
Yep.
So you're doing the best that you can, with the time that you have and full-time job
Mhm.
and all that stuff. So, yeah, I think for me, like, that first pregnancy, I mean, I was truthfully just making stuff up as I
Oh,
went,
yeah.
like how to train, listen to my body. But I even tell people now, like when they're like, you should write a book. And I would like to, but I'm hesitant, right? Because it's like you don't want to tell people what is too much, what's
Yeah.
enough, because even within the professional realm, I have two teammates who had a baby before me, had a baby after me, and our pregnancy training journeys were so different. Like
Right.
Kellen was able to run up until like 38 weeks.
Yep.
My belly got too big and I had too much pain in my pelvis at like 32 weeks. So I'm like, I'm done. I go back to like, I really believe your body lets you know what
Mhm.
it's capable of doing. And like, if you really listen inherently, it's like, that's too much, right?
Yeah.
We can look back, if you got an injury, you're like, ooh, when that stress fracture, whatever happened, you probably could have
Right.
pinpointed, ooh, I sort of pushed it in those weeks that I shouldn't have.
Yeah.
So I think pregnancy was like that, and then I was fortunate with my OBGYN. She was so wonderful, like, I would ask her, like, guidelines, and she just goes, "You'll know." And she was so right because I was like, "How much is too much?" And my own motivation level was like, "Oh, I'm over this." Meaning, like, when I'm out training now, the motivation's super high. I'm like, "You need me to run 90 miles next week?" Like, "No problem, I got
Right.
this." In pregnancy, I was like, "Yeah, 42 sounds good for this week." I just had a different mindset, and I wasn't
Yeah.
I wasn't building towards any goal except giving birth to a healthy baby. And
Right.
so, it was very easy to modify my training. I wasn't worried about losing fitness. I was like, if I can keep my body healthy, have a great birth and post-birth,
Yep.
then fitness will come eventually. So,
Yeah.
yeah, Riley, I was figuring out, and then honestly, I tell people this, I accidentally got pregnant with Hudson when I was 6 months postpartum, and, then that was just, like, a really scary time because I felt like I was just getting my body strong
Yeah.
again, and I got pregnant, but I look at my life now and I'm like, "Oh, they're best friends, and they
Right.
never known life without each other, so I can't imagine any other way."
Right.
I would say that probably took me longer to recover because I essentially felt like I was recovering from 2
Too. Yep.
pregnancies in 15 months. So
Yep.
that's why I say like 3 years postpartum is when I really felt like I got back. And then I think having Sophia, because I was looking forward to it, I learned so much of like, oh, it's not just your glutes. I need my core to work together. I need to be having correct breathing patterns, like all these things.
Mhm.
I also had a strong foundation coming into that 3rd
Yep.
pregnancy, different than Hudson. I just came off 1 pregnancy.
Right.
I was very vulnerable, my body. Yeah, so I think that and just being super proactive, like with Sarah. I mean, I got treatment during pregnancy. We were like, "How are my hips doing? How's my core?" And,
Yeah.
um, I mean, it hasn't been without hiccups, but I'm constantly working on stuff most every day.
Yeah. But I feel like there's so much even, I know, Sarah, you probably feel the same way, like how we even treat in pregnancy as far as, activity tolerance, what you're able to do, lifting, running, all that kind of stuff is so different than even just 5, 10 years ago. It's so different. Kind of what was your thought as I'm assuming you guys were like, all right, hey, we're gonna do this. Um not we, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Although you
Yeah,
guys have known each other long enough.
we have. Who's
I
involved?
mean, so what did that conversation look like? And then also, where was that in the context of the retirement? I'm super curious about that because I was ready for the retirement, and then all of a sudden it's like, nope, we're going to do baby and we're going to do this again.
Well, I'll let Steph speak to retirement on because that is a good story. But I would say like even like Steph mentioned, like probably the last 2 years leading up to her last pregnancy, a really big gift that came like during the pandemic and after was Steph founding Grit and Growth retreats that we put on with our good friends Tiana Madison and Dawn Harper Nelson, who are both Olympic gold medalists and moms and just amazing humans. And so because of that, we were seeing each other a lot, which was awesome since we don't live in the same place. And so it kind of gave, I think, us a chance to just continue to check in on Steph's body over the course of that time. And as part of those retreats, I'm giving these pelvic floor workshops to participants, and Steph's, listening in and I think kind of rechecking all of those things on herself. Right. And so there was just, I can't say enough about how much happened before then to let herself start from a really good place. And before her pregnancy, she raced the New York Marathon, did amazing. And then what happened next, Steph, after that, after your retirement party? That was one of the best parties ever. So I'm excited we have to do it again. We'll invite you, Carrie.
Nice.
It was pretty great. Yeah, I mean, like when Sarah was, you joked about her, but she really has been like part of it since like the whole time. I mean, they were at New York where we thought that was my final race. And I just had my whole support crew, like Dawn and Tiana were there and Alonzo, and in like a how could you script like going out, this would have been how it was supposed to be. But if I could take you back, like the decision was the year before I started to just not do, I wasn't doing super well in running, and I wasn't sure like what the cause was for it. I was just having a myriad of symptoms. And basically the Olympic trials were that summer in June. And in May, I lost my mom to breast cancer that had metastasized and moved to her liver. And we got to spend like her last few weeks together, and it was a beautiful gift, but she declined pretty quickly, and we brought hospice in. And I think even though I had been through that before, I lost my dad when I was 18 to cancer.
Oh my goodness.
I just was like, it just hit me so much differently. And I don't know if that was being more of an adult, and now I have my own children, and just carrying around like this anticipatory grief of her being sick for so long. And after she died, I think I just was carrying a lot of that in my body. And I started to not run well like that fall. And I was like, maybe this is what happens like when you're at the end of your career. This is like the feeling of like you're actually just like not progressing, you're getting worse. So coincidentally, I found out I had a heart condition that I was born with, which at first was a little scary. It was called bicuspid aortic valve disease, but turns out like it's not a scary disease. 1 to 2% of the population is born with it. I just happened to find out when I was 38, and I just was like, are these all signs that like I just should hang it up? And so I was like, you know what? A lot of people retire from the sport and they kind of go out quietly, but I want to go out with a bang and go out on my own terms. And so I planned this whole year and sharing my like racing schedule with people. And then as like the races went on, I was like, gosh, like things are going really well. And I had someone ask me, they were like, do you think, because you put this finale or this end date, that's why like you're doing really well? And I was like, well, what if it's going really well because I'm actually not done? Like, what if it's going well because all the things that happened to me in 2021 was because my mom died, and I was feeling that. And, I just was like, maybe it's not a coincidence. Maybe like there is still something left in the tank. And so towards the end of the year, I was like, oh, this is like, felt embarrassing. It felt sort of like, can I do that? I told everyone I was retiring. Can I go back on that decision?
Jordan did it.
Yeah, these other like male professional athletes, and on a small scale, like a smaller version of all these big time athletes. But I was like, I think I can do it. I just had to change of heart. But on the converse, I was like, but I'm also 39. I do want to have another baby. I was like, could I do this? And so I dared to believe that I could get pregnant as soon as like the year ended, and then I could try to make it back for the Olympic year. And of course, lots of people were like, yeah, that's all well and good, but things don't always go according to plan. You don't always get to be like, oh, wow, like I want to be pregnant. I got pregnant.
Yeah.
And I was very fortunate that I did. Got pregnant like right away. And yeah, due date was in September. And I just remember telling Sarah, I was like, okay, I'll have almost or 4.5 months till the Olympic trials marathon. Is that crazy? And it was crazy when we thought about it, but it happened.
Oh my gosh. Does it like in the rear view, does it seem like unreal that you were able to kind of put that plan together? What does it feel like?
I mean, it just feels typical of my life. Like, hey, I have this plan, and
On
like
brand.
yeah, it's totally bold, and people would be like, "Why are you doing this?" And in my head, I'm like, "Why not? Because this is
Right?
like fulfilling me." And I feel like if I can have a baby, granted, everything will have to go well, and I have to like come back conservatively aggressive, if that makes sense, to be able
Mhm.
to run a marathon for 4+ months. But I promised myself I would not jeopardize like the integrity of my body,
Right.
my health, the weeks with Sophia. I didn't want to miss any moments. And to be honest, like I did all of that. I
Yeah.
somehow
Yeah.
stayed healthy. I Nothing was injured. I didn't miss any of Sophia moments. I had really tough like first couple weeks postpartum, but we just went at a rate that Sarah called it operating below the red line. And I think that's why
Yeah.
when it comes to the performance wasn't like in my head what I believed I could do. And I know a lot of people are like, that was an incredible run. And I appreciate that, but I'm always going to have a higher goal, you know?
Right.
But I think it's also because I had to, what Sarah reminded me is operate under the red line.
Yeah. No, and I what I so loved about just kind of watching the whole journey unfold was just your maturity and experience as a mom. I think there's so much to be said. One for your vulnerability and sharing your story because I know you got a lot of shit for a lot of things that was really undeserved and people just need to shut their mouths. But to put that out anyway, like that's like total top level mom kind of move. So I'm like, yeah, she can do that because she's handled everything else up to this point, so might as well.
I mean, that's what's like cool, but also it's like this weird space to be in because it's like you don't want to justify your behavior, because it's your behavior, but it's like I don't know what I give birth to what I feel like these gigantic healthy babies and my body is not compromised and nothing is wrong with them. So I
Yes.
clearly don't, but it's like you don't want to like tell the internet, hey, I know what I'm doing. Look at all the. So it's
Right.
a weird line to walk, I would say. Because you don't want to have to do that. We shouldn't have to, but you also
Right.
want to educate people and say, hey, like it's not a shouldn't be this like light bulb, like, oh wow, women actually know what to do in their own pregnancies.
Right.
We do.
Was that a big difference? Because I'm assuming your boys, you weren't on I don't think social media was as much of a thing when you were pregnant with the boys?
It was let's see, I would feel like Instagram was just like when I got married, I remember in 2012, I remember having this and I thought it was this filtering app. So it's so funny. I like had me in my wedding dress and I was like, "Ooh, this is pretty." And I was doing this. And then
Yeah.
like one of my friends texted me and she's like, "Do you know you should put your wedding dress on Instagram?" And I was like, "Okay." It's definitely like I did not know that. So yeah, I feel like once the boys were born, I was starting to like be a little more on social. And then
Mhm.
after when I figured out what like DR was and the
Right.
stretch marks on my stomach, that's when I posted that photo that was like, "Hey, like, here's what my stomach looks like after having," and the 3 or 4 finger gap, and I just
Mhm.
said, "I'm feeling, like, stronger than ever," and so looks can be deceiving, and that's sort of what blew up, and then People Magazine interviewed me, and it was sorta crazy from there.
Yeah, I would imagine. I would imagine. My personal favorite when, you were pregnant this last time was your little jumper. The
Oh,
Yes.
the
little black one, oh, it was so cute, and it kept getting bigger.
That thing stretched.
What is that called? Like,
It's just it was a Hoka. It's not a jumpsuit, but something like that. I mean, it's the only thing they have it on like that on their website. You would find it very easily. I honestly was like, I don't normally just push products, but like
it's so cute.
every woman should wear that because
Yeah.
it does. It just fits like most bodies, like, and it's like tight but stretchy, and it kind of conforms to whatever hips, chest size, all the things that you have.
I loved it. It was so adorable. So
Very
what kind of as you're progressing through your pregnancy, what are the conversations that you guys are having? What were the concerns that kind of came up and so on this third time?
Yeah, I think that like the biggest thing that I mean, of course, as soon as Steph's pregnant, like I sent over a Google Doc right away, and it was like, this is our plan. Like this is what's going to happen, and these are our goals. And I think the biggest thing was, and I think this is actually really really good take home messages for everybody who's listening today. Is number one thing is we want to keep Steph out of symptoms like through her pregnancy, right? And I really have seen this, and I know Carrie, you have too, that I think one of the biggest predictors, besides obviously the things you can't control in your birth, is the symptoms you have during pregnancy. And so Steph and I were really, really, really watching for any lingering pain in any areas and getting that treated as fast as possible, just so we didn't have her brain make those connections that that area is a problem and that area is something we need to watch out for. So I think that was absolutely huge. I think a big thing was just like allowing her to run faster in her pregnancy, right? So, Steph, you can speak more to that, but you were on the track a lot. You were basically like the professional pacer for all of Flagstaff, right? During your pregnancy. So again, like just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you should just go jogs, not at your pace for a half hour. That would have been not beneficial for her. So continuing to let her run like herself as long as possible. So I think those were some of the big things. And then Steph, you can get into just some of the preparation that you did for birth, just really being in touch with that area. So as much as we could, getting her body ready for the idea that her pelvic floor's job was to open and let her baby out, and that was a natural process. And the more that we could let that happen, it's just like a race, right? We get to the starting line as best prepared as we could be, and you never know what's going to happen. But she really got to that starting line well prepared.
Yeah,
I love when Sarah tells her version because it's like it's so much better than I had. Yeah, I think sometimes like because I'm a professional athlete, like for the most part, I know what I'm doing, but I think a lot of people would be surprised. Like I have lots of questions. Like I'm asking things that you'd be like, oh, like I honestly will be like, Sarah, like, should my vagina feel like that? Or when I'm coming back to training, I'm like, okay, it feels like kind of heavy, like, and I'll honestly be like, all right, I'm sort of like sitting down and I'm like looking, I'm like, okay, should I see like some parts? Like, so there were all these questions of like, what is prolapse? What is, what's normal? When should I be concerned? Incontinence, all that kind of stuff. And so again, I know what I'm doing, but then a lot of times I'm like, ooh, like I know my body, but I kind of don't know my body, or it feels like it's a little foreign sometimes.
right.
So yeah, I'm someone that's like, I love to learn and I'm always curious. I feel like whenever you stop wanting to learn is like when you are dead or like essentially you should always want to be learning or you're just going to stand still.
Yeah,
And so for me, like when Sarah created this document, it was very much like, okay, I do want to work on like efficiency because for me running, when I get to a point of like, oh, my body can only run like 8 to 9 minute miles,
right.
that's become less efficient for me. And I'm like struggling. So there's sort of no point in that. So why don't I cut my runs down and instead let's do 200-meter or 400-meter repeats at 7 minutes. And so I did that towards the end of my pregnancy when I felt like I couldn't handle the duration.
Yep.
So I kind of wanted to keep that turnover, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so we did that for a while. And then it was kind of like, all right, well, I can't really do any core work anymore. What can I do? And I remember one day telling her, like, I can't do anything physically, so I can train my mind. And so the last like 8 to 10 weeks of pregnancy, I trained my mind how to give birth. And then the 8 to 10 weeks postpartum, I trained my mind of what are you going to do when you come back to training, when like work are starting to hurt again, not because you're physically broken down, but because your fitness level isn't there. So
Right.
the power of like being able to train my mind when my body wasn't able to do anything, I think was really powerful for me.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't think it's a coincidence, but I had one of my best birth stories with Sophia, and it was just beautiful and everything I imagined and envisioned. And I did a lot of prep work on sort of hypnobirthing. I kind of looked at
Mhm.
that school of thought. And to me, that was more not this like trance or I'm in this other state, but
Yeah.
like I just want to be aware of everything that's going on,
Yep.
how I'm going to handle it when I'm confronted with that discomfort and
Mm.
going back to, like, telling myself, "You can do this. Women were meant to
Mhm.
do this." And,
Yeah.
yeah,
Do you feel that that was just a very different approach than you took with the boys that you were even, like,
100.
aware of? Yeah.
Yes, I would say with the boys, I kinda was like, "I'm a professional athlete, like, I can do this. I
Yep.
tolerate pain, I should be able to," but I was working against my body and not with it, and I think that created a lot of friction, and it created the need for an epidural for Hudson, I think because I was so anxious. What happened to Riley? He was
Mhm.
in not optimal position, he was face up, so then, like, all my contractions yeah, and then I laid on my back, so that wasn't helping, like, with gravity, and so I was asking Sarah, like, what are the ideal positions I could try
Yeah.
to be in if I can get there?
Yep.
Um, yeah, and I was able I essentially, I was like, "I think I wanna be on my hands and knees," but when I got to the point, I was
Mhm.
like, "I don't have the strength, I can't." Uh,
Right.
even just being on my side delivering, which she
Mhm.
said was huge, opening up my pelvis.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, I don't know, it was just so beautiful, and I wished it for every, woman who's experiencing childbirth and mother who that they just take ownership and they have a story that they, like,
Yeah.
are proud to tell, and, granted, we're all gonna go through different ways to get there, and some might have way more painful contractions or their water breaks, and so there's no shame in getting drugs or doing all that, but for
Yeah.
me, personally, I wanted to see if I could do it naturally, and I was able to, and so I was very proud of that
Yeah.
process.
I think that's such a gift, when you do have that gap between your kids because you have that time you had time to recover, you had time to plan, you had time to envision what you wanted to do differently. And it's
Yeah.
so hard when I mean, my kids are only 2.5 years apart, but you really I don't think you get a chance to recover in
No.
between, or you didn't want it like it was last time if it wasn't great, but it's you don't necessarily have that perspective. And we also, again, Sarah, speak to this, like the tools that we had to prepare for delivery completely different
Mhm.
9, 10 years ago than we do now. Like even just the context or the concept of your pelvic floor has to relax so your uterus
Mhm.
and your baby can do the job. Like that's only the last year or two that I'm just hearing that
Yeah.
on the regular, right?
Yeah, and that was my and Steph's conversation exactly, Carrie. And I will speak for every pelvic floor physical therapist who's done having kids, and including Carrie. That what a dream scenario to get to basically do a
Right.
pregnancy and postpartum again. So that's what I also took Steph's thing was of if I did this again, what would I do, right? And yeah, having that information and like Steph and I talking about like this is how the uterus contracts, right?
Right.
This is what happens, and like I said, it has to get out of the way. And so, like Steph mentioned us going through different birthing positions and feeling what would make her open up the best and having her have that confidence in it.
Yes.
And exactly. And how that was really the start to our, postpartum and her getting to her goals was like, let's get through this birth with as little birth injury as possible. And so
Yeah.
when that happened and Sophie was born for all the amazing things, one of the amazing things was that she came out nice and gracefully and left Steph in a good place for us to kind of start the postpartum journey.
That's fantastic. That's
And
fa
she came 11 days early, so it gave me
I
11 more
remember
Yeah.
days.
that. I remember that. That was nice of her to give you a little extra time.
Yep,
What a very gracious daughter you have.
I did.
That's awesome. Okay, so let's dive right into postpartum. So we have this plan. So
Mhm.
far, Sophia's part of the plan. She's like, "Yep, I'm on it. I'm with you guys." Like, how did those first couple weeks roll out, knowing what it's like, also to be early postpartum and not have a lot of control there?
Yeah, I told myself with this pregnancy because I wasn't sure if it was my last, I was like, I wanna just, like, soak up all the moments, like,
Yeah.
even the ones that suck, the ones that are really hard, and I was so like, that first week, we didn't leave the house, I just, uh nursed, slept, ate, cuddled. Like, that is what I did
Perfect.
those first yeah, and
Mhm.
I honestly didn't do that with Riley and Hudson, and so I was, like,
Mhm.
just, like, soaking in, like, how beautiful and hard this was, and
Mhm.
loved that part of it, and then, um, I really struggled with, like, my breastfeeding journey, just
Mhm.
because she had a really small, oral anatomy, and she had a tongue tie and a lip
Yep.
tie, and so within the first, like, 2 days, my nipples were bleeding and cracked, and it was
Hamburger nipples are hard.
I mean, it was, like, the stuff that I understand why people give up, and
Yeah.
so but I was trying to, like, get through it, and then a lactation consultant came over, and she just was like 2 things, she weighed her, and she was like she's, like, losing weight, like, she came in at 8 pounds, 5 ounces, and she was just not gaining well, and then even
Mm.
after feeding, she was only getting, like, 2 ounces. So then, like, my production was not doing as well, so then I'm pumping while I'm trying to,
Oh,
like, tell my body, "Make more milk." Um, I'm feeding her very often, and people are like, "Oh, how long is she sleeping?" I'm like, "Oh, like 90 minutes, at a time at night." And so I was getting up 5 to 6 times a
oh
night.
gosh.
Yeah, and it was just and I'm just like it's like a full-time job. I'm
Yep.
like eating and drinking, and then I'm changing my pads, and I'm changing like the little Tux pads, and I'm spraying stuff on my maternal. I'm like, "Okay, wow, who has time to check in with my other 2 children and my
Right.
husband?" So, yeah, it was, like, overwhelming those first couple weeks, and I just remember, like, crying a lot, and I had some of those moments where I'm like, "Wait, I asked to do this, like, I want,"
Mhm.
and that was really difficult. Um, and then we kinda went backwards with breastfeeding. The consultant was like, "This is like, I can't have you, like, power through this. You"
Yeah.
she's like, "This is not normal," and she's like, "Her anatomy, she's just not latching correctly, so then she's not extracting." So they gave us an option of getting a procedure. We weighed those decisions. We ended up going down, getting a laser frenotomy.
Mhm.
The doctor said she did beautiful, and now for the next 4 to 6 weeks, we would have to do mouth PT exercises,
Did that
um,
with my daughter. I understand.
like 8 times a day. So not
Yep.
only are we getting up in the middle of the night, now I'm doing exercises
And they
on
don't like it
no,
either.
it is
Mm-mm.
horrible. They're like, "Okay." But after and then sorry, mind you, during this, we went to bottle feeding because we just feel like she was not getting enough, so I'm
Oh,
feeding exclusively, that I'm crying because I'm like, I wanted to breastfeed for, like, a year, and now
yeah.
I'm already at bottles, and she's only, like, 6 weeks, but then after a week, she miraculously came back to the breast, and so I was able to get back breastfeeding, and I was like, "Oh my gosh," like, it worked. But that only lasted a few weeks.
Okay.
The same thing was happening. She was not
Mm.
her 2-month appointment, she was not gaining weight, and now I'm power pumping, so I'm feeding her and I'm trying to pump after each session, and I was like, "Oh my gosh." So they're like, "Why don't you try a couple more bottles?" So we did that. She
Yeah.
sit down. Once we did that for a few weeks, then all of a sudden we had a couple days where I put her on my breast, and then she was just beside herself crying,
Oh.
turning away from me, and that was the hardest moment. That was like a gut punch of like,
Yeah.
"And how is this
Yes.
baby who, like, I gave birth to, like, refusing?"
Oh.
And so that was really, I don't know, demoralizing. I don't know what it was. It was just I felt really, yeah, like, not that I failed, but I was like, How is this happening? Like, this is the
Yeah.
most natural thing." And so, I had about a week where I let myself just kind of, like, say, "You had this timeline, you wanted to nurse your baby for a year, but she's obviously loving bottles, and then she started to gain weight back.
Yeah.
This is just what your daughter is telling you she needs to do, like, she
Yep.
needs bottles." So it took me a few weeks. We transferred to bottles, and then I was just pumping, like, 6 to 7 times a day, and so I was still getting up in the middle of the night pumping.
Oh
Then
my goodness.
my husband would feed her, and I was like, "I can do this," and this is, like, a few weeks before the Olympic marathon trials, and I was like, "I know a lot of moms have to do this, like, they go back to work, so I'm not different," but it just felt so hard and so
Pumping is so lonely. It's just The sound, I get like, ugh, when I hear the sound. It's so, oh my God.
My, like, nipples, like, had this, like, white crustiness from, like, the
Mhm,
dryness, and I was like, "Oh my gosh."
mhm.
So, it probably took me, like, 3 to 4 weeks to where when I told people how much I was pumping, they were like, "You don't have to do that." And I kind of
Yeah,
I know I don't, and I just there was some part of me that there were a lot of other moms, but pro runner moms who were,
yeah,
like, nursing till their babies were, like, 9, 10 months, and I was
yeah.
like I just felt like, why couldn't I do that? I felt like nutritionally, like I was doing all the things, I was getting the
Mhm.
calories in, but I think my body oh, and sorry, also, then I got my period back at 11 weeks postpartum.
That's wrong. That
Thank
is not fair at all.
Okay, I appreciate you saying that because that's what I felt like, and so I'm like, maybe that's why my body won't make milk because it's like, "Oh, why don't you have another baby?" Or I don't know, yeah.
But I
It
told Steph that it's kind of her biggest flex that she got her period back at 11 weeks postpartum, because what
Right?
everybody also doesn't know about this girl until you are with her for an extended amount of time is she eats more than anybody I know. Whenever stay with her, I realize I'm like, I need to eat more, because she really, like, she takes her nutrition so seriously. And so I think that everybody obviously in our field who studies like Red S, and
Yes.
how amazing is that, that
I was
your body is ready to, like, that's, you're doing something
right?
right.
I
And
was
so
gonna ask you how much you were eating, 'cause I love, A, that we're having this conversation, but, like, it's just that was your priority, and you're like, "I need to do this, and my body's okay with all of it," and, I mean, how did you figure out how much you needed to eat when you were doing all this pumping?
I mean, I think it's hard to explain, it's probably why I've been an athlete this long and I don't get injured. It's just, like, intuitive. I don't
Mhm.
measure anything. I just am aware of, like, I burn a significant amount of calories
Yeah,
training, and then because I am a fit person, just at rest, I burn so much, like, my
mhm.
metabolism's always going, so I mean, I have food as soon as I get up in the morning, and I have food right before I go to bed, all the things that they're like, "Oh, don't eat past a certain point," things that, like, in the diet industry, and I'm like, "No, calories are calories, like, if you're
Yeah,
putting them, you need to bring them in," and I rarely go more than 3 hours without eating, and I
I love
just
that.
yeah, besides the foods I'm allergic to, there are no foods that are off limits to me, so
Mhm.
that's big, and I don't know, it's hard to know whether it's childhood, like, grew up with 3 brothers, food was just food, there was no, like there was nothing ever attached to it, no
Yeah,
emotion, stuff like that, and so food is just fuel for me,
yeah,
and it
always
was part of the plan, right, Steph? It
it
was like, we look at the document, that was basically on the document, both
yeah,
the resting and the food. It's like, this
food.
is your job. And it's, I think that one thing a lot of people can take from Steph's journey is that, like, that should be the priority early on, is like
yes.
having that rest. Let's let her tissues like heal at that really normal length and or shortened state, rather than her up on with everything, all that pressure going down all the time, her getting proper nutrition so that those tissues can heal. I think it was all part of the plan. And I also want to emphasize, like Steph mentioned, the pumping. I mean, I think that probably 50% of our conversations for the first, don't you think, Steph, for the first 4 weeks or more were about breastfeeding and about the struggles with Sophia. And so it
Yep.
really, it shows you stress is stress in the body. And as
Yes.
practitioners, it's like, it is just as important to be there and make sure our patients have appropriate resources for those things,
Yep.
because it was a really a big part of her journey.
Yeah, no, I think that that's so important, and that providers need to be having the nutrition conversation or somebody to refer out to, and again, I think that's come from we've got more moms returning to running,
Mhm.
and having very, public stories, but when you go back and listen to them, there's so many stories of stress fractures,
Mhm.
and you go back to nutrition and that sort of thing. I've been paying attention a lot in the ultra community, and they eat because they're running, forever. They talk about food all the time,
Yeah.
and I love that it's starting to spill out into other spaces like this. And again, like, I think that's where the energy deficiency conversation is so important in um, here with lactation, because it's low estrogen. We're the bones are being impacted. All this stuff, we have to talk about it. And I
Mhm.
had a client the other day. She's doing fine as far as getting back to running, but her child isn't sleeping, and not she's not getting food as much because her child is having some allergy issues, so navigating all of that. And I'm like, do not worry about running right now. Do not worry about workouts. We need to get sleep. We need to get food. We need to get the stuff figured out with your daughter first. Let's figure out that kind of, and that sometimes that's the treatment is like, let's get that figured out. Cause if we can get that figured out, then this other stuff will come.
Yes.
So.
Exactly.
Or even if running is, they're like, no, running's their priority, then make the other things their priority. Like, I don't like, I was too busy to eat excuse, or, yes, I have to feed my children first. But if I'm not fueled, how am I going to make Riley and Hudson? So I tell them that, I go, guys, I need to eat my food first, and then I will get to you, and they're going to be okay. And I think this motherhood is like, let's put everyone first, and I'm like, your kids are fine. Like, you need to eat first.
Yes.
So that is a big part of it. Riley just wants to say hello.
Hi. In my house, we know that if mom doesn't get fed and if mom doesn't get her sleep, no one's happy.
Exactly. And I think that's really important to, like, I remember, I think I was talking to Dawn, actually, Dawn Harper, and we were talking about like the role that partners, for her, it was her husband, Alonzo, and for me, Ben. Why is there this whole, oh, well, once the baby is born, like the mother's got it. And Dawn's like, we don't know what we're doing. I mean, why do you think all of a sudden, because we gave birth, we know. So it's like, besides maybe breastfeeding that they can't do, they can do everything else. So there are all these things. It's like, bring me a snack, bring me one. It is. So it was sort of like, if you're fortunate to have a partner involved, like get them involved and don't be the hero that's like, I got this all. So
I love that.
And it's like, I know Steph, and I know the way that she eats and the way that she runs her nutrition, but like as providers, it is such an important thing for us to pay attention to. And it was always a part of our conversation. And like, I would ask her, and I'd be like, I know this is what you do already, but I think it's something we have to bring in as well.
Definitely.
And then bringing in other practitioners, like I mentioned, like going then into from those, first couple weeks on where, Steph continues to have these pumping struggles, these breastfeeding struggles. Celeste of Recore Fitness, who we all love so much here, becoming a team, right? And working, and we've known each other for so long, but literally Celeste and Steph and I getting on a Zoom like this and having us both look at things at the same time. I think that's another thing that especially pelvic floor PTs should keep in mind, is like how many resources that we have in our communities, and knowing those resources, whether it is the lactation consultant, Steph said, but really being able to know that like we work better in a team. So want to say that was a really fun part of early on with Steph, and some of those initial things, like, she had done so much during pregnancy, and that's what we had said, both Celeste and I, to her, is, hey, you're learning all these exercises and these moves for postpartum. So that's I think another thing people can glean is like sometimes going to pelvic PT or working with a prenatal specialist beforehand, then you're set up for postpartum. So she knew what she needed to do already. And we could be like, oh, hey, Steph, remember that exercise we did when you were 30 weeks? We're doing it again. Now you're ready for it. Cool. She, I think, looking back on some of the big markers of her success, besides that initial rest, I think that's the very first thing that she did athletically to set herself up, besides eating. Her kind of getting out, like she said, going under that red line, testing the waters. Like, can we walk a little bit? Texting me, calling me, hey, I felt a little bit of heaviness after that walk. Okay, cool. Let's scale it back. Let's not go tomorrow. And then the next day, let's try on the treadmill a little bit uphill. Okay, cool. That was good. All right, awesome. And us really knowing every day when she started, hey, I had a really rough night with Sophia. That wasn't the day to do something the next day. Right. But I can't say enough about having, constant communication with your provider. If you can somehow make a relationship. I know obviously Steph's a professional athlete. This is not something that we always have access to, but having regular appointments with your providers, I think in those first couple weeks can be really amazing. And so her starting some of those initial things. What else, Steph, about those like initial weeks? Because I think I saw you in person around 4 weeks postpartum in Flag, but before that, what else was?
I love, like, on your document, remember we talked about like bouncing back, and you changed the narrative to like, why bounce back when we can fly forward? Like, there was definitely there was a mental component of like, okay, we had the timeline of the Olympic trials, right? And granted, this is my job, but I also told myself, you can't compromise anything along the way. So if you find yourself doing that, you have to let go of that end goal. And so I think like flexibility was big, because I kind of had like a really good trajectory those first couple of weeks. And then all of a sudden something happened in my SI joint. And then I was like, wait, now I couldn't get out of that. And then I had 3 weeks where I was like, I can't run at all. And then
Mm.
really sad. Then Sophia breastfeeding was happening. And I definitely was like, this is not what I wanted. You know, I was just like, this is not like how I scripted it. But realizing like, however you script it, you're going to have 2 steps forward and then 1 step back.
Yes.
Um, and so that happened a lot. And then, like I said, it was like, okay, if you can't train, like what can you control? So I doubled down when I wasn't running on doing more PT exercises.
Mhm.
Like, okay, let me work on my ankle joints. Let me work on
Right.
calves, my, all the other things that like I
Yep.
could attack. I did stuff like that. And then we just had like testers of like when I felt ready. And for
Yep.
me, postpartum, the next day is always a really good indicator of how you did.
Ah.
So if next day you feel heavy in the vagina,
Yep.
or next day your pelvis hurt, ooh, probably overdid it. So let's
Yep.
back. So it's similar to like coming back from a big injury, but also like
Yeah.
your body's so different, and realizing this is not like you trying to get back to your body. Like you have a new body now, even after
Right.
pregnancy. So you have
But
a new version of
I
yourself.
love the trial and error, and I
Mhm.
think that's why Sarah and I get along so much is we kind of think similarly in that respect. It's like you have this framework of, okay, we're going to do this, but we have some guardrails here so you don't go
Mhm.
crazy
Mhm.
and go off the end there. But I think also you knowing what your own litmus tests are is you're
Mhm.
like, okay, I'm going to try this. I know I'm not going to feel it in the moment. It's really tomorrow. That's the thing. And then
Yeah.
once you feel that, instead of being freaked out, you're like, "Oh, that just means that I just need to, you know, play with this a little bit more." It coming at it with a sense of curiosity and kind of as opposed to, "Oh no, that didn't work. I am screwed." Like that's not good mentally at all.
Mhm.
Correct.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
I think also like looking at this as an opportunity to what else can we change, right, in your body? Like I look at
Yep.
my own pregnancies and postpartum, and so with Steph, it's like, yeah, I would love for Steph to get a little bit more of hip flexion when she's
Mhm.
running, for example, and as she does too. And so like let's emphasize that. Like you're building this new stride again. Like how
Yep.
awesome. I think also Steph's, not a lot of people know, but she's also an incredible coach. And so her even having it can combine with the fact that Jenna, the assistant coach for NAZ Elite, who's amazing. We had talked to her a lot beforehand. And so between like her and then her other coach, Jack, and Ben, like writing, their per program, Steph was doing a lot of her own programming. She was trying things
Ah.
out. We tried out the Ultra G. We're like, let's see how the Ultra G
Yeah.
looks. We tried out the light speed. We're like, let's see how the light speed works. And that was, I think, really cool with her kind of figuring things out, see what felt best on her own
Yep.
body too. Yeah.
That's awesome. So you're getting started. You're feeling a little bit better. How do you bridge that gap between this thing that you know you wanna do, and it's not gonna be exactly, the way you would love it in your head, but you still wanna be able to show up at the line? What kinda was that the last couple weeks of training before, trials? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, I feel like I just had a couple markers that, like, in my head, I was like, "You should be able to do this to think you can run a marathon."
Mhm.
I think when I did, like, it took me all the way until probably, gosh, what was I? I was, like, maybe 15, 16 weeks postpartum, is when I had a 21-mile day, um,
Mhm.
and I did, like, 17 of it moderately easy, moderate, and then like a 4-mile push, and push was kind of like marathon effort. And I was able to run around 6-minute pace or just under for those 4 miles, and then like a little cool down. And I was like, okay. And then I did like a 10-mile tempo, 10 miles at what felt like marathon effort. And that ended up being
Mhm.
around 550 per mile. And I was like, all right, well, that's in the context of like a 70-mile week.
Okay.
That feels like enough to know you can probably get through the distance and
Mhm.
actually be okay doing it and not have anything like lingering. But
Mhm.
then those next couple weeks were like, okay, what kind of pace can then you be holding?
Right.
So yeah, it was a combo of like trying to get a lot of like long stuff in, and then
Mhm.
also pace work. And so my last thing I did that sort of was like, all right, you're gonna be okay, was 21-mile day, and 14 miles was that marathon effort. And so in
Mhm.
7.5, I averaged around 6 minute pace, or maybe 6:02 pace for 14 miles. Um,
Mhm.
I was like, all right, like, I think I could try to run that for the marathon,
Okay.
down at sea level. Yeah, but then, I had some struggles like with GI stuff the last couple of
Oh,
weeks. It's sort of just been my career a little bit. So that's like a whole nother conversation we don't have to get into. And I think that led to a little bit of feeling lower energy and flat and kind of zapped going
mhm.
into trials. But the goal was still like, does everything feel healthy? Nothing hurt
Yeah.
my hip or my pelvis. And besides, again, not having like the best day out there, I finished and I walked away from it with like no, not worse for the wear, pretty much. Hips,
Right?
glutes, everything felt fine. And I ran 2:47, finished on a tough day. And yeah, and then I was able to get back to training like 2 weeks later. So to
Well,
me, that's
and
success.
I mean, again, Joe, I'm gonna pick it up off the floor. Um, no, it's it's just one of those things. I mean, for those of you that didn't follow the trials, I mean, how many women dropped out? Like, it was a lot.
Yeah.
It was a hot day. It's Orlando. It's humid. It's not Flagstaff at all. How soon did you go down a little bit before?
But why would just went down 3 days. We got to Orlando 3 days out.
Okay.
So not
So
too much.
you've got time change too, a couple hours there.
Mhm.
And the boys came with you, or and Sophia came? Okay. So you got the whole family.
I mean, I had some help. My sister-in-law also came, so we have help.
I'm just looking at that. I'm like, that alone. So you're standing at the line
Mhm.
and you're like, okay, I'm here. I made it here. Did you kind of breathe a sigh of relief and you're like, I know I can do this? Or is there still questions in your head of like, I don't know. I'm not sure.
No, I knew I could run the distance because,
Mhm.
like, I've been running professionally for, like, 12 plus years. I've run 17 marathons, and I have grinded through a lot of tough days, and so, if you think like my best time is 20 minutes faster than what I
Yeah.
ran at the trials. So, like, if you put that in perspective, say that's someone who's run a 3:10 marathon, that's them, like, can they run a 4-hour marathon at
Right.
4 postpartum, then you start to be like, okay, like I think, women could be like, I can wrap my head around that, right?
Yeah.
You see my time and you think like, oh my gosh, that's crazy, but it's all relative to what I've done.
Right.
And so I knew that I could do it. I had to sort of separate the Stephanie that I am at my best.
Yeah.
Like Stephanie that 4 years before on that starting line was trying to make the Olympic team and missed it by 19 seconds, to like the Stephanie that, wow, like on your best day, maybe you run 2:35, or and
Yeah.
be top 25, top 30. And I was very far off that, but I was confident I could get through the distance. To just at
Mhm.
what pace and how the race played out, I never would have been able to predict. I thought I would be passing people and pick people off, where instead I kind of went backwards and had a bathroom issue and threw up some gels. So I had a lot
Oh,
of things go wrong. But one thing was like I was gonna get to the finish line.
yeah. No, and I think at that point, I mean, you've had so much experience that I mean, it just sounds like you're just so gritty anyway that it was going to happen.
Yeah.
How much did you give yourself time to kind of let it sink in while you were running? You're like, okay, I've had 3 kids, and I was able to get here. Did you have a moment to let that sink in a little bit?
I did. It happened at mile 25. So I had a mile to go. And I just remember my first thought was like, wow, like a lot of people have passed me. I don't think a lot of people are behind me. And not to knock, but like that's not typically where I'm at. So it was very different for me to be like, okay,
Yeah.
definitely in this space where you're not used to being. And I remember passing one of my friends, Will Lear, and he was like cheering, and I was running slow enough where like I touched my heart, and then I like reached over and I kind of like high-fived him, which again I would never do, but I just was like, you're on a different mission now.
Yeah.
And I definitely was like, you've run 25 miles, like up until this point you have just run for 25 miles. And then I was like, and you had Sophia like 4.5 months ago. And yeah, it kind of hit me that I was like, you're doing awesome. Even though it was like
Yes.
not the way I envisioned it, but I really had a moment of like gratitude for myself. And I was like, okay, like you got here, and this is a really painful last 6.5 minutes, but
Yeah.
you look at how you got here. Like you just ran 25 miles to get here. So
Yeah.
not just on the day, but then, in the months before that I did. So
Yeah.
I did have a moment of,
And the Google document, right? Let's go back. It all goes back to Google. I mean, that was what was one of our goals. I like number one goal was like to have this credible performance on paper, but like probably number two goal was to finish it healthy and get to the starting line healthy. And who knows, what if Steph would have pushed it and gone, past the red line a couple times and maybe she finished 24th, right? But then she got hurt right afterwards.
Right.
And the rest of this year was nothing. And so I told her too afterwards, you just got a solid training cycle in. Like you got a solid training cycle in while you were also pumping the entire time. And so that was a whole nother level of stress on your body that's not measured in amount of miles per week.
No.
We don't put that in yet, right? But we've seen how important that is. And so the fact that she stressed her body and got that kind of result, like the rest of the year can only look up from there. And so I just think that is something to be so proud of. I think it's way more significant than her getting some incredible performance that day, because it was an incredible performance that day. And it was her body of work over the months leading up to it.
Yeah. Well, and that was, I think that something that was so poignant about that particular trials was, one, how many moms were running. Oops, somebody's ringing. How many moms were running and how many pregnant moms were running. So 2 pregnant moms, and I think there was like 20 something moms, but like the different stages that you all were at were just so incredibly inspirational. And I think anybody who knows, like, there's no way ever any pregnancy that I ever had that I, would ever think at 4 months postpartum being able to do that stuff. So for me, I only have a tiny sense of what that would take to do, and just in complete awe and inspiration for so many people. So please know that like all of us were just like for you. We're screaming, we're cheering at the TV screen. Like, even though if you did not feel that, we were doing it. So
I appreciate that. That means a lot.
But so now you've gotten through, you're not retired. What's on the next Google sheet, Sara?
We haven't written one out, but no, I think some people maybe thought like, oh, that was great. Like that my goal was, can I get back and run in that trials? But like, no, I have some really big goals, and I don't think that my career is anywhere near over. And I'm going to train my butt off and try to stay healthy and see what is possible over this next year, 2 years, 3 years. And I really like to crush a lot of these goals. But I'm just excited to put in the work and to see like what my body is able to handle coming off this 3rd pregnancy into my early 40s. And I don't know, stay tuned.
I'm telling you, I'm almost 48, and I have not, I'm stronger, I'm faster. It's just, it's a gear that I don't think socially we were taught to expect. So it's super fun to be like, okay, I don't know what can I do? What things can I try? And it's such a cool mindset to see that in so many people. Oh, we lost Sara. Where'd she go?
Yep. Your internet.
Oh dear. No, so I love that for you. And I think we're all super excited to kind of see what comes up with that. All right, since Sara, hopefully whenever she pops back, we'll get her back on. At the end of each episode, we have a couple questions for our guests. So I'm going to pull these up for you. Sara's answered them before, so we're okay. All right, first one is, and you may not have an answer for this because you're too busy. Book you're reading or podcast you're listening to right now.
Yeah. I'm reading like 5 books, if you can believe it.
I love that.
Yeah. It's like, I have little bits of, a lot of my reading isn't necessarily for like pleasure. It's informational because I have free time. I want to be learning something.
Yep.
And so I haven't quite got to that, like, entertain me book phase, but Fuel the Fire by Pam Beatty. She is sports nutritionist, and I'm starting to probably work with her here pretty soon. And I just love her book for all runners because it's just talking about the importance of food as fuel. And I think it really helps, men, women, everyone can learn from this book. And then I have like this old like champions book looking at like runners back in the 80s, 90s, 2000s. Yeah, what their training is like. I think I have, gosh, what else? Oh, Hard Things, like We Can Do Hard Things.
Yep.
By Steve Magnus. I'm blanking on the name. Christine, you Speed Up. Is it Speed
Oh,
Up?
Up to Speed.
Up to
Christine
Speed.
Yu.
Yep.
She was on
Yep.
her podcast. Yep.
I love her. Love her.
Great.
So yeah. So again, I'm reading like bits of things, and then podcasts is kind of like always different, but nothing. Oh, Sarah's battery died and she can't get back
Oh no. Did she
Okay.
text you or?
She did, yeah. I'll just tell her.
Okay.
I'll tell her we're almost done.
Okay. Text
Yeah.
her this question because I have I didn't get a chance to pop it up, but we do have a question from Instagram, and
Okay.
it's from Amy the Punisher, and she says, "Why are they so cool?"
She would say, "We're not that cool. We're just us." And I mean, we like in our heads, we tell ourselves we're cool. We're like the cool moms. Like again, we know what we're doing in our fields, but we're just trying to get the most out of ourselves. And we realize everyone else is too. And so
Right.
it's like, you can just help other people like find their potential, like her
Right.
business model. It's like, I don't know. That's why we started Grit and Growth. Like we were just like, we just want to be friends with people who come to Grit and Growth. And that's what ends up happening. And we have such a great friendship, Sara and I, and then with Tiana and Dawn, it's like we just want people to share in that. Like,
I love
yeah.
that. Do you know Amy? She's a ultra runner in California, or I guess she's in Oregon now.
But I love her already.
Okay. She did an article after she gave birth about basically, oh, maybe Sarah's back. Okay.
Hi, everyone. Sorry.
Hi.
Little tech issue, but I'm back.
All good. So you're going to have to help me with this story because I had a question from Instagram from Amy the Punisher. She said, "Why are they so cool?" And I was trying to explain
That's so
to
funny.
Steph who Amy is.
Well, first of all, I would just ask the question right back to Amy. Why is
Right, exactly.
And I mean, Amy is such an incredible, ultra runner. She's had so much success in the ultra field. But one thing that she's done so well is she's also shown that postpartum can be hard. She had a less than ideal pregnancy and postpartum during the early pandemic. And we had a really, really great time getting to work together after she had kind of not really been able to get treatment and care. And now, you can check out her Instagram, Amy the Punisher, but you can go and see she's having a great second pregnancy. She's up, so I don't get to see her as much, but she's doing so well and kind of rewriting her story and inspired her a lot.
No, I've loved getting to know her, and I have my first trail race on Sunday, and so she's given me some tips. So she's like, "It's okay if it's a really steep uphill. It's okay to walk." I'm like, "Yes." So anyway, that was the one that I wanted to be sure to share. Before that, Steph was giving us her book and podcast recommendations. So
Yeah,
did you have any more podcast recs, Steph, or no?
I don't.
Okay.
I default to Sara, and again, I'm trying to get better about utilizing my downtime. But sometimes I feel like I'm wasting it trying to find what I should be listening to or reading.
Right?
So I fill it with other things.
I'm guessing because running is your job that you're not allowed to like listen to music or podcasts when you're training. Is that?
I don't like to.
Okay.
I never. It's not even the like to. It's sort of like that's just my time. Or I'm usually with teammates too.
Right.
So like, yeah, and then I've never really had that need because I just like to be in my own head.
Gotcha. No, I get a lot of books read these days. That's the only way I get it done. I have the stack next to my bed and I fall asleep. And then I have the ones that I actually get through because I listen to them. So maybe in your next retirement, that's what you can work on. So.
Nice.
All right. Sara, you answered all these. We're going to let Steph roll with this. Favorite activity since becoming a mom, round 3?
Oh gosh. I don't know. I don't necessarily. I think one thing I like cherish is like our family time, and Sophia is currently not in this yet because she goes to bed, but like most nights we eat dinner and then Sophia goes to bed anywhere between 7 and 8. And then Ben, myself, my husband, and Riley and Hudson, we have like family movie night, and whether that's 30 minutes, depending on their bedtime, or an hour, but we're up in our kind of like loft movie room and we're just watching whatever the boys are into. Movies, shows, and we usually make popcorn. That's kind of like my cherished family time that we do every night.
I love that. Do you get to do chauffeur time to get the boys to activities and stuff?
Yes, but it's like, I don't know, that time is not cherished. It's kind of like Yes, and if I'm carpooling, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, why did I sign up to drive 5 9-year-olds?" It's, so
Oh, are
yeah,
they doing that Mew thing, whatever, with the face? Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
I
My
don't, but
son doesn't do it. It's like I don't know, they put their fingers on their face and then
um,
they
I'm
pucker.
just not ready for all the things that are coming my way, so, yeah, if I can drop off and pick up as seamlessly and not hear
Uh,
it, I'm it's better.
fortunately, my kids don't do that, but, no, for me, car time is when my son actually will talk to me, so I actually love dropping him
Wow.
off to school in the morning and stuff because he actually talks to me, or if we have an appointment or activities or things like that, he'll actually talk, which is really nice, but I can see with, 5 boys in the car, that would not be happening at all. Alright, one piece of advice for new moms.
Uh, gosh. Rest when they're resting, that one's big, I can't overstate that enough, and then, yeah, I also think, I'm really big on that, like, comparison, don't compare yourself to your older self, whether
Yeah,
you haven't had children before, your body is a different body, your mind is a different mind, like, all the things that were you're still you, but you're just, like, a different version of you, so I
yeah,
think it's okay to, I don't know, like grieve the loss of who you used to be and now just figure out like who you are now. And that's going to change how
yep,
you show up in a relationship, how you show up as a mom, how you show up in your work life balance. Yeah, for me, like third kid, I'm totally different than how I
yeah,
was with Riley and Hudson. So give yourself
yeah.
a little bit of grace.
Yeah, no, I love that one. For you, and we'll tweak this kind of for your niche a little bit. Like, who's somebody in kind of the pregnancy postpartum running world that's just doing really cool stuff right now, or somebody that you're just like super proud of and excited to watch?
Oh gosh. One of my really good friends, Rachel Smith. Uh,
Hmm.
she is a professional athlete, and she just had quite a journey to get to where she's at right now with giving birth to Nova, her daughter, and yeah, all the things she had to navigate. She had a pregnancy loss, and I'm just I'm excited for her to kind of set the world on fire in the running sphere. And then obviously, she's on the podcast, but I'm going to say Sarah because resources, like, I don't want to make her too busy, but like the whole world could just
Yeah,
benefit from her knowledge. And I just wish there was a million versions of her because then she could be spread apart. And I don't want her to be spread too thin, but she just has an amazing ability not to just share like her knowledge and teach people, but to like make people feel seen and feel worth it.
yeah, no, definitely. And I not knowing her as long as you have known her, and we have not met in person yet, which we really need to change this. No, there's very few people in our profession where I can talk to them for just a few seconds and I'm like, wow, you know your shit. You know what you're talking about. And you're just a genuinely good human. And I just want to, be around you all the time. And Sarah's very much one of those people. So yeah, hopefully again, we're going to get this fixed this year, right?
And I would say, follow Steph Bruce and Carrie Pagliano. Those are both also excellent resources as well.
You're so sweet. And then Steph, you also, and I'll pop this up here, you have made a second, bless your heart, a second Instagram account.
Oh,
Which is
yes.
Chasing Dreams and Motherhood. I'm like, I can only handle one account. I don't know how you're doing 2.
I'm not as up to date as I could be, but, yeah, you can try me on there.
I love the intention of like, no, and I think you were even very open about this. You're like, my intention was to record something every day, and that's too hard. We're not gonna do that.
Right?
We just need a film crew to follow you around all the time. I think that would be probably weird too. All right, and then last one here. What does it mean for you to be an active mom in postpartum?
I mean, it's kind of just a privilege, I would say. Like my job just as a professional athlete, I feel like is a privilege. And for me to also be able to get pregnant is a privilege, all these things. So I really try to walk that line of like everything I get to do is such a bonus. Granted, I work hard, so I don't want to take away from that, but just being able to navigate those two worlds like at the same time is such an honor.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's been such an honor for us and privilege for us to be able to watch you and again, thank you for being so vulnerable, sharing your story, and just showing people how real it is. And it's hard and it's messy, but we still have some things that we can strive for and learn about ourselves. So thank you for kind of being so open with that. So cool.
Thank you.
All right. So if you want to know more about Sara and Steph, you can find them Pelvic Potential, Steph Rothstein, and Chasing Dreams and Motherhood on Instagram. Thank you, ladies, so very much. I know it took forever to get this organized, but it means a lot for you guys to be able to set your time aside to chat about this. And it's just an absolute pleasure to have watched you guys in this partnership the last year. So thank you. Thank you so very much.
Thanks for having us, Carrie.
Yep, it was an honor.
Did you enjoy the podcast? If so, leave us a 5-star review on iTunes and tell a friend to do the same. Are you a postpartum mom or postpartum pro wanting to know more about getting back to running after baby? Check out all my free goodies on carriepagliano.com. This podcast represents the opinions of Dr. Carrie Pagliano and her guests to the show. The content should not be taken as medical advice and is for entertainment purposes only. Always consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions.